everyone. Welcome to the 2024 PHLAFF Q&A panel sessions. I'm Gabe Castro, a local Philadelphia filmmaker and a member of the reviewing committee. Today we are talking to some amazing filmmakers who have films that are a part of our festival this year, and I'd love to have them introduce themselves and tell us a bit about their films. So, whoever'd like to go first.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mariana Serrano. I'm a writer, director, born, raised, and based in Miami, Florida. And I'm very happy to be here with Arroz, Leche y Powerball, the film that I wrote and directed. And it is kind of like a concept pilot episode as well. And it is about a Cuban-American family that's multi-generational and full of problems, but it is a comedy. So they overcome these problems throughout just like love and connection and definitely comedy.
And I'm Mark Polasky. I'm the producer of Arroz, Leche y Powerball,
Excellent.
also in Miami.
Viva Miami. Sorry. Hey, I'm César Velasco, and I'm the writer, director, producer for my short film, Sueños, un retrato cinematográfico. It's an experimental film. It's a poem, first and foremost. It's a nuanced reflection on my and my family's immigration process out of Mexico City and into Canada and later into the United States. And yeah, it's called a retrato because it's a self-portrait. It's a poem. It's a self-portrait. It's me trying to reflect on some of the more nuanced moments and feelings that we experience as first generation immigrants. And yeah, I hope it evokes some sort of feeling with the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. And these are, very different films, but both emotional in their own way, and there is a connection that you can have. I definitely felt like the the conflict and the just like the anxiety in your film, Cesar, and then like the family too in your film. Like I was like, that feels like my family. So just two really beautiful films and very engaging performances by everyone involved. I'd love to hear about what inspired these films, like what motivated you to create them.
Do you guys want to go first?
Yeah, definitely. So for Arroz, Leche y Powerball, it's heavily influenced by my own family, but also by like my Miami family. Like we have an amazing, beautiful community of Cuban Americans. And I was very happy to be able to like work with Cuban American actors and Cuban actors. And really the story is a lot about second generation immigrants and first generation immigrants and kind of living in that multi-generational space that a lot of us have to do in Miami because everything is so expensive. So we end up all sometimes living together at different points in our lives as adults, not just like as children. I really wanted to explore that kind of like sense of being together as a family, but in an older adult, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really fun to do, and definitely I wanted to keep it in the comedy space because a lot of the things that we go through are you can't help but laugh, you know, like even when it's things that are like going wrong, like I really value that in our community and being able to kind of still take it with a stride, and that's kind of what I wanted to have throughout Arroz Leche Powerball because the family goes through they're basically having dinner and it's all kind of like a mess like it always is, and then they hear that the Powerball is like super high that night, and over the course of the night that's kind of what the journey that they go on is to win this Powerball, and then they end up learning a lot from that situation and from each other, and really that their strength is in their togetherness, not so much in in winning this Powerball. And that's kind of like the hope at the end of the film, that 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 they have each other, and that's important. I feel that with, like I said, with my Miami community as well, not just my family, like my Miami familia, like I feel like we all have each other's backs, especially in the filmmaking community, and it's nice to have that sense of family, and I really wanted that presence throughout the film.
Yeah, it's definitely there. It's very endearing. Like the yeah, the journey that they go through. I was like, I feel like I've been there like a Sunday night doing the same thing, but like that perseverance and just being like we're together, and that's beautiful in all of our quirks, and I really appreciated that.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I guess for me, this I had a dream when I was 15, and it was at the time that we were moving, my family, my immediate family, we had emigrated outside of Mexico City to Toronto. And by the time I was 15, my dad had gone a work opportunity in the States, and we were all moving down at that point. And I had a dream of rollerblading along my little streets in Toronto, and my dad comes by, and before I know it, I'm in the car. Before I know it, I'm in the back seat, and we're driving. And I think that poem, that kind of dream, has lingered in my head for a long time, obviously. And started writing a poem about that a couple years after, and that has kind of led through years of journals into the piece that we have now in Sueños. And it's really, I mean, it's a love letter to myself and to my dad. I think it's trying to explain to him in a way that I see him as a human now. I think I see myself in him more than ever before. And I think the understanding that, or trying to show the understanding that I have for the sacrifice that both my parents, did by getting up and leaving their friends, their family, their jobs, their careers, their education potential. My mom being a therapist and moving out of Mexico, all of a sudden you can't practice because you're not American or Canadian or whatever it may be. But with an understanding that as difficult as and weird as it was as a teenager to have to leave the place that I now felt like was my new home to a new place that I didn't really have any interest in going, which was Texas. That even with that, kind of like this forever note of gratefulness towards my parents, because my dad left everything and my mom left everything with the hope that their kids would have different opportunities. It wasn't even a sure thing for them, right? So I think like understanding that nuance and that I think giving that to my parents a little bit was a big deal for me, without ignoring some of the weird angst feelings that I had when that kind of film, or when I had that dream when I was 15, and also just to kind of, I think, further lift the veil to the immigration process. And I think a lot of people assume that if you're in the States and you're Mexican, you kind of came across the border in a weird way, which I think is not very true. I think most of us come with jobs, with visas, and maybe 2 years into the process that ends up going away, or something changes, or the immigration process all of a sudden is different than it was when you originally applied. So trying to, communicate an immigration process that's a little bit different than maybe what we're used to seeing in, the average kind of narco show. And yeah, just a little bit more nuanced and experimental. And yeah, again, it's something that I very much did for me and for my dad and for my family. So
Yeah, there's, so much that's being told with, I feel like, so little, right? There's this like isolation of location, and, we have this one person that we're following, and having that experimental element to it really draws that out. Like it doesn't feel like we're trapped in this place. Like we're moving and we're in this transition, and you can also sit with the words that are being spoken. And I think it's really beautiful. And that kind of actually brings me to my next question, which is, with something like this, like both of these films, like a lot is going into creating them. I'd love to hear about any challenges that you might have encountered while creating it, or maybe things that had to change. Like filmmaking process. there's always something getting thrown at us, where we're like, oh, I guess we have to do that. So I'd love to hear, of any things you either had to overcome or maybe rethink once the production process started.
Yeah, so for this was actually it's funny because it was such a fun shoot, but it was very challenging. I was working a full-time job on an Apple TV show, and I had I had never had to like really juggle like my own production, which is like an extra full-time job, and then and in terms of like planning and getting things prepared, and thankfully I had my producer to be by my side, but still like as the director you need to there are a lot of things that you need to do before you get into shooting. So that already started us off like, it was a lot. Like I'd finish my 12-hour workday, and then we kept going, for the film. And then I don't know if you want to talk about a little bit of the challenges too, but we had a really large cast, and that's already like scheduling and making sure that everyone's available to do this. And in the script, it was scripted, what I wrote, that there's a big rain scene and a car accident. And, we had a tiny budget. So I don't know if you want to jump into some of your problems.
Yeah, I mean, so Mary, let's see how I want to say this. So a good bit of times, like, she'll be writing scripts and stuff. And, like when you're sitting in your room and you're writing a script, like it's easy to write, whatever. And then actually, then the producer hat needs to come on, like not only with me, but she also, is always a producer on the films too and knows how to execute these things as well. But when I first read this script and I saw that there was rain, it's like, okay, well, it might need to be like me in a hose in the corner, very tight. And she's like, no, I want a wide, I want to see the car, I want to see the family, and it needs to be raining. And it's like, okay, let's see how that works. So luckily, we were able to get rain towers for very cheap through the very same show she was working on. And, I'm pretty entrenched in the community here and get people to come on. Most of the people were free, worked for free for us. So we're able to take our tiny budget and stretch it at least like 10 times of, what it should cost for those things.
Yeah, and really because everyone, it's so much like of a passion project, and in so many ways, and everyone really comes on with like the best attitude to make this happen. And that is, I think, the part of like challenges that are important is like seeing how you can overcome that within like your community, your friends, and everything. And we're so grateful to all of that. But it has been a learning experience for sure, for me in terms of the things that I kind of want to keep creating, and then also I don't know, we had some people who are some of our actors have been doing this for a very long time, and then we had a couple actors that are more like in the social media space, and that was really fun to work with, like to kind of bring that in, and that was a very fun challenge, I'll say. Like, even though it is a challenge to kind of get everyone in a similar mindset, especially when people haven't done certain things. Like for me, that was a joy. Like I loved being able to kind of connect different kinds of actors together. That was a great part of it.
Yeah. Well, and the one thing that Red
Oh yeah,
said, yeah, so we have this like social media,
comedian.
kind of star, I guess, or whatever, influencer. And he had told me like, oh damn, I got this show, like they're flying me out to wherever to like perform at this thing, but like don't worry, don't change the schedule. I just won't go that day, but like I'll go all the other days. And it's like, no, dude, like you're in the shot. Like this it's not a TikTok video where you're just like, editing yourself and then yourself again and yourself. It's like you can't just not come to set. Like
Yeah.
you're in every shot. You're in a shot with a family at a table, you're in a car, like so then we had to move the whole schedule. But he just didn't understand. He's like, oh no, I'll miss that one day, but I'll be all the other days. And it's like, no, 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 that's not how it works.
Yeah, but it's fun. I think that's part of the work, like when you're bringing in someone who's perfect for the role. It's Mr. Red, and he plays the character of Gustavo. I don't know if you remember like well the family, but he was like so pivotal to all of the comedy elements. He is a comedian. He brought so much to the table, and being able to kind of like show him how this works was extremely, I guess, satisfying. Like it was fun, it was fun to do that and to work with him. And he's amazing. The whole cast is just, it was so fun to work with everyone.
Yeah, it's like that. It's the family that you're talking about, right? Like your production family and the actor family. That's amazing. I love that.
Yeah, it was fun.
I love the idea of like because I totally get it. It's like we want to make it rain. Makes sense to try to do it in a close up, but you need that wide, right? I love that.
Well, you got to see
Um,
them struggle.
yeah, no, you do.
Yeah.
That's super. I'm totally with you. That happens so often. I feel like. Yeah. So I come from a commercial production background, so I produce and direct a lot of commercials. I've worked on some narrative stuff, but um, this really felt like my kind of opportunity to fully embrace my own chaos. And it was something that, like I said, it initially it needed to be a self-portrait. So I think, traditionally the self-portrait is done, in your studio with yourself,
Mm.
um, or in your bedroom with a mirror, and that's about it. Um, so with that too, and having been a producer, I decided that this was going to be kind of like my own show, whether it's, ego or control or whatever it needed to be, maybe a combination of everything. Um, but so that in itself was a challenge, just because, I turned down money for it. I didn't want anybody else involved. That wasn't myself or a very selected few. Um, and by the time the poem was coming to kind of a phase where it felt like it was done on the page, and it needed to extend itself from that. Um, I was working on a commercial, and I had one director of photography with his camera stuck at my house, and I kind of coerced him into shooting the opening scene for the short, and then from there I was able to kind of, with that in the can, start kind of taking the next steps. Um, and then the challenge of, shooting with a different DP almost a year later on
Mm.
film, to do all the car situations. And then even the last shot, which is just a plate of the sky, but that's a whole other DP almost
Wow.
6 months later. So we did it in stages, kind of in units. But the Houston unit, which is what we shot on film, that was very interesting. It was a very small team, almost all Mexicanos, that are willing to go out there and get a little crazy. I got my crew like the shittiest hotel I could find, because it's like, it's kind of um, by the bay in Houston. It's where you have all the oil refineries and all that kind of like mise en scène that exists. This kind of like beautiful landscape meets this like very modern industrial monster almost. So that, and the tunnel, that was the only tunnel I scouted, maybe like 10 or 15 tunnels around the Texas area, and that was the one that would give me about 2.5 to 3 minutes drive through, which is enough time for us to like make this tunnel feel endless.
Mm.
But anyways, and so that was a challenge on its own, as finding this tunnel. We finally get there. I get these guys like this terrible motel type of situation, but it was, kind of cute in a way. I thought it was kind of weird. I thought that would kind of add to the vibe, I guess. Um, the car that we use on the film, I actually went through a bunch of used car lots outside the Houston area. After a bunch of cars had kind of fallen through on my search, I just decided to drive through car lots and see what I could find. I was planning on basically almost dropping like that $1,000 or $2,000 and just buying a shitty car and hopefully doing something with it afterwards at that point. Um, but I found this incredible guy who owned this lot. I kind of told him what I needed and what I was looking for, and he had almost like the perfect car. Um, and he gave it to me under the condition that I left my car as a
Wow.
trade-off. So I did. Left my car with this guy, took this other car. And then yeah, and then we started shooting. Also, we had this insane like storm of like in Houston, the storms get pretty crazy, and we're shooting on film. We're outside. We're rigging all the exterior of the cars, so that in itself was very challenging. Um, but also like coming from kind of a production background, and it's me that's in the film acting. Having to sit inside the vehicle while my crew did everything in the rain, because I can't get wet. Otherwise, I don't have a change of clothes. And how are we going to
Mm.
get the scene if I'm wet and it doesn't work? That felt like the hardest part, I think, for me. I think at that point I had been so involved in everything and physically doing a lot of things. And also kind of, but it was a good exercise in letting go a little bit as well, right? You know, like at some point you do need, you bring people in because you trust them. You trust their experience and expertise and their ability to pull off emotionally what you're trying to communicate. So it was a really good exercise in kind of letting go of that as well, and letting you know, these guys do what they were there to do, and they really pulled some beautiful images from that. We didn't have almost any lights, you know, for any of that. So we had to be really careful how we exposed and how much we were going to push the film afterwards to get the kind of desired effect. Um, and yeah, and then just getting, you know, emotionally involved into the acting portion of this as well. Um, since I was 17, I had been making a series of kind of like self-tape, like, you know, art videos, you know, in the angst of being a teenager and growing up. Um, you know, that it kind of like the way that maybe somebody plays music or something, that's this is the way that I know how to communicate. So I've made a series of these called curtains. Um, and the whole thing with that is that behind the curtain, you know, I'm always wearing makeup, I'm always hiding. There's certain music and sound elements and all these kind of many films that I had made through my teenage and early 20s. And this felt like the first time that, you know, this is a true self-portrait. This is with my name, with my face, kind of putting out a very um, deep feeling of mine onto a screen for other people to see. So this also felt like a very emotional kind of statement to myself that, you know, this is who I am and this is me and this is how I want to show it. And this is part one. So in the effort to continue to grow and change and develop and, you know, continue to see the world differently, and kind of staying true to myself and allowing myself to change and develop too. But yeah, I guess that's a lot. I don't know if any of that works with your question, but
It
thanks.
does. No, it does. And I think that speaks volumes to sorry, like the uh your ability to communicate what your vision was, the fact that you were like switching over DPs and taking all that time between, and that disconnection physically from, you know, your crew, the fact that you still, you know, got this story that you were envisioning and that is still very personal and were able to communicate that to your team. And I think that's amazing. um yeah, and you kind of talked about it, but I, as kind of our last question, what do you hope audiences will feel after watching your film? Like, what do you want them to do or leave the theater thinking?
Is that cool? Sorry,
Kind of
we
you're on
switched
the
the
roll,
order
yeah.
now.
Yeah, go for it.
uh, um, Yeah, so I made, like I said, I made this film for myself. So the first time I played it for a few friends, it was very interesting because it dawned on me that I hadn't thought about my audience at all, um, which was again a big learning thing. This was also very intentional. This was something that was meant for me, but um, you know, my first couple friends, it made them think of their mom and it made them think of their dad. And, you know, there's a sense of confusion and people that are native Spanish speakers or speak Spanish got it, you know, and got a feeling immediately. English speakers tended to be a little more confused, which I think it's perfectly in line with what I was trying to do. Um, but more than anything, I hope to emote a feeling, and whatever that feeling is, whether it's a sense of confusion or anxiety or loss or joy, love. I know it makes me feel a lot of love towards my dad and what he did and what my parents did and who they are in my life. You know, I'm so lucky that I had parents that continually love me and continually love each other. That's not something to be taken for granted, and that's what I feel with this film. Um, so as long as you feel something, I think that's the ultimate goal here. I think you can take that as intimately as you want it to, or discuss all the weirdness and, you know, Easter eggs about it. That's cool too. But I think emoting a feeling, I try to, with every project that I do, I try to give it, you know, an internal emotion for myself. and that's kind of the North Star for what we should feel. And even in commercial work, you know, there's sometimes you're selling happiness with Coca-Cola. And it can be that simple, but I think if you can stay even a little true to that internal feeling, and whether it's in that 2 second smile or a half a second spilled drink moment, that's enough for me. You know, I think that's enough. We're all worth it just by existing. We don't need to prove or do anything, and we have the beautiful ability to feel and to feel deeply. And that's all I want for people that see it to feel something and feel it deeply. Um,
Amazing.
It sounds so amazing. I really, really can't wait to see your work. It's like really, from everything you're saying, it just sounds like very, very visually like exciting to watch as well as emotional. Um, for Arroz, Leche y Powerball, I really hope that people can feel connected to the family in some way, even if you know you weren't brought up in a big Cuban family. Like I still hope that people can find themselves reflected in some of the characters, maybe all of the characters in different ways. And also, really wanted my community, Miami, to feel like they can see themselves on the screen. A lot of the times when people think of Miami, they're thinking of Miami Beach, the glitz, the glamour, you know, like everything's amazing. And the truth is we're just real people and we live here, we struggle as a family together, as a community together. There's a lot of things going on, a lot of changes going on in our city. And I wanted to highlight that. I wanted to see it through a comedic lens of this family, but yeah, the effort of and the like they're striving, they're challenged in their lives. All of them have something going on, and that's why I wanted a really big family to kind of represent different elements of what's going on in Miami in terms of like living situations, economically, culturally. There's a moment in the film where we have like a nice meeting of two different cultures coming together in like a very fun way. And yeah, I really hoped that my community, that Miami could kind of find themselves in this film.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, both of these films are just so human, and I think that's like where we relate. Like we've been there in some capacity. I think we can absolutely put ourselves into these stories and, you know, be transported to a moment in our history, whether that was last week or, you know, in our youth or somewhere. So, thank you all for first of all creating such amazing films. I'm so excited to see, you know, how the community and how Philadelphia receives them. I know they're gonna love them, and so thank you all for having this Q&A and sharing a bit of your process with us. And you know, I hope you're able to see each other's work and some of the other amazing films here at the festival as well.